All right, let's talk about Family Guy Season 24, Episode 3. They say some people are born on third base and think they hit a triple. Well, I think that's exactly what happened with this episode's writing staff. They came out swinging with this whole Fire Island plot and this whole meme culture critique, and I'm not sure they fully grasped the triple they thought they'd hit. It's like they watched one TikTok and decided they were cultural commentators. But hey, at least they remembered to put Joe in a wheelchair for a bit. We'll get to that. But this episode, this is the one where they decide to tackle memes, masculinity, and maybe, just maybe, the concept of gay islands. Stick around because we're about to dive headfirst into a sinkhole of questionable jokes and a plot that feels like it was written by an AI that just discovered Reddit. And before we get too deep into this chaos, if you're somehow still here after all these seasons and enjoying this nonsense with me, do yourself a favor and hit that subscribe button. It's free, and frankly, it's the least you can do for me after I have to watch this stuff so you don't have to. So, this episode starts with that classic Family Guy opening song. The one that feels like it's been playing since the Bush administration, lamenting the loss of good old-fashioned values in the face of modern media. And then, bam, we're thrown into this scene with Peter and Quagmire observing a car crash. Peter launches into this ridiculously over-the-top explanation of the crash, treating it like some profound philosophical statement about restaurants versus home cooking. It's supposed to be funny because it's Peter being Peter, but it quickly devolves into this weird debate about memes. Quagmire, bless his heart, has apparently never seen a meme before, and Peter tries to explain them as Mad Libs for personality. It's here the episode shows its hand. It wants to talk about internet culture, specifically memes, and how they represent a lack of real thought or effort.
They even throw in a jab at Kevin Costner movies, which feels like a shot fired from a sinking ship, considering the show itself often recycles the same joke structures. But it's not just memes. They're also trying to touch on the Little Mermaid controversy, which is always a safe bet for some cheap laughs. And then Osama bin Laden. Yes, the guy who was definitely killed by Navy SEALs is suddenly a potential tourist attraction for punching. This is where the episode starts to feel less like a coherent story and more like a checklist of current events and internet trends the writers hastily scribbled down. The Navy SEAL bit, where they confirm killing bin Laden and then speculate about whale diets, is classic Family Guy. It's crass, it's a little bit tasteless, and it's designed to shock. But then they pivot to charging people to kick his corpse, which is just, wow, even for Family Guy, that's a bold choice. And then, out of nowhere, we get this random Brazilian guy doing a samba dance, thanking them for their service, only to reveal he's just a regular guy. It's a non sequitur piled on top of a non sequitur. Honestly, the show's attempt to critique memes feels as lazy as the memes themselves. They're trying to say people who make memes don't think, yet Peter himself is presented as the one who knew the perfect time to hit send, which is the most passive form of meme creation possible. It's like they're criticizing the very thing they're trying to use to be funny. The whole autopilot of comedy line from Peter, comparing himself to autopilot while still being at the controls, just highlights how little effort they think goes into these things, while simultaneously admitting they're the ones in charge. It's a self-own disguised as a joke. Then the plot shifts again. Lois is annoyed about looking for bin Laden's corpse, which is a valid point, but Peter's response is just to pull out Wheat Thins and Costco muffins, like that's peak culinary achievement. And the guys all agree, calling it a home run. This is where the episode starts to explore the idea of a guys-only world, a place where men can just be men, free from the complexities of relationships with women.
It's a flimsy premise, but it sets up the next major turn. They get struck by lightning. This is the catalyst for the whole Fire Island adventure. The dialogue around the lightning strike is full of frantic confusion, and then they find themselves afloat, clinging to balloons and a turtle. This is where the show really leans into the absurd. They find a house that looks like a villain's lair, a RoboCop beach house from the 80s future, which is a very specific, very weird image. The dialogue about the primary bedroom versus master bedroom is a nod to modern sensibilities, immediately undercut by Peter's crude joke. It's that constant push and pull between trying to be relevant and just being gross. Meanwhile, Tom Tucker is on the news, reporting on a sinkhole and wreckage found off the coast of Fire Island. This is the show connecting the dots, or at least trying to. They tease Peter's fate and his likely presence at a famous gay party spot. Then we have the meme phase. Brian is trying to work, but Peter is all about forwarding memes, talking in meme speak. He's saying, this is a mood and the math ain't mathing. Brian's exasperation is the audience's exasperation. He's calling Peter out on his lack of originality, his reliance on others' work, And Peter's defense is that he knew the perfect time to hit send. This entire interaction feels like a meta-commentary on the show itself. How much of Family Guy is original thought, and how much is just hitting send on a familiar joke structure? The reference to Barbie 3 is a nice touch, showing they know their own sequel fatigue. The whole bingo card bit is a classic Family Guy move, taking a simple concept and stretching it into oblivion. The idea that Brian doesn't get the bingo card is the show saying its humor is too advanced for some, while Peter's interpretation is just baffling. The discussion about periods and toothbrushing is another example of a tangent that goes nowhere. It's like they have a bunch of jokes and then try to stitch them together with a flimsy plot.
When they find shelter, they learn about the island's inhabitants and Peter's wish for a world of just guys. The reveal that they're on Fire Island, a place known for its gay culture, adds another layer to Peter's man-child fantasy. The song that plays is an absolute masterclass in how to make something sound vaguely like a Christmas carol, but be deeply offensive and topical, packed with celebrity names and references to roofying and Dua Lipa's father. It's the show at its most unhinged, mixing pop culture with truly disturbing imagery. The final scene with Stewie getting a book deal for forwarding memes is the ultimate meta-joke. The show acknowledging that the biggest reward for new media is getting to do old media, like writing a book, is brilliant. It's a critique of the superficiality of online fame, but also a testament to how the show itself operates. They're referencing memes, then using those memes in the book, and the book is being read by Morgan Freeman. It's layers upon layers of irony. The ending, with Peter enjoying himself on Fire Island and Lois desperately trying to get him home, is the typical Family Guy resolution: chaos, absurdity, and the vague promise of consequences that rarely stick. The idea that Fire Island is just for Wall Street guys and regional weathermen to be gay is a clumsy attempt at commentary that falls flat. And the twist that the community is actually a high-cost resort where uggos pay for hotties is a darkly funny take on superficial social dynamics, but it also reveals the shallow nature of Peter's wish. He wanted a world of just guys, but he didn't think about the actual dynamics or costs. It's a perfect encapsulation of his character, driven by impulse, lacking foresight, and ultimately causing problems for everyone else. The final scene, where Peter is being tickled by Timothy and Lois is on the phone begging him to come home, is a darkly humorous conclusion. He gets his wish, but it comes with a price, and he's still the same oblivious Peter.
The whole episode is a wild ride, a messy commentary on internet culture and male escapism, leaving you wondering if they're mocking the things they're referencing or just desperately trying to stay relevant. And that, my friends, is the magic of Family Guy. It's never boring, but it's often baffling. And we haven't even touched on Joe's floating chair yet. This episode was a roller coaster, and I'm still trying to figure out if it was a fun ride or if I just got whiplash. Let's break down this glorious mess. So, the episode kicks off with that iconic, slightly dated opening song. You know the one. It's practically a time capsule of early 2000s anxieties about media. They're all concerned about violence and sex, but where are the good old days? Well, lucky for us, there's a Family Guy, a man who can do all the things that make us laugh and cry. It's a little meta, isn't it? They're singing about their own existence. And then the episode immediately dives into this chaotic scene where Peter is pontificating about a car crash, turning it into a treatise on the superiority of restaurants. It's peak Peter, overthinking the mundane to a ridiculous degree, and it's supposed to be funny. But then it morphs into this bizarre conversation about memes. Quagmire, of all people, doesn't know what a meme is. It's like the writers suddenly remembered memes exist and decided to tackle them head-on, but with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Peter's explanation, comparing memes to Mad Libs for personality, is actually pretty spot on, but it also feels like a defense mechanism. He's critiquing something while probably spending hours making them. They then try to throw in a reference to Kevin Costner's perceived lack of acting range, implying memes are as thoughtless as his performances. Ouch. The episode then takes a sharp left turn into the Little Mermaid debate. It's a low-hanging fruit for jokes, and Family Guy isn't one to shy away from controversy, even if it's just to make a quick gag.
But the real kicker, the moment that screams Family Guy trying too hard, is the sudden appearance of Bin Laden. Yes, they bring up the Navy SEALs, the confirmation of his death, and then somehow pivot to the idea of charging people to kick his corpse. It's shock value for the sake of shock value, and it's followed by another bizarre non sequitur, a Brazilian guy doing a samba dance who then disappears. The show is throwing so much at the wall here, it's hard to keep track of what's supposed to be the main plot. Is it about memes? Is it about celebrity death? Is it about cultural appropriation with the samba dancer? It's a mess. Then Peter, in his infinite wisdom, explains that vegans are always talking about being vegan, using a meme as an example. The meme itself, the one about vegans saying, "Nobody asked," and then the protagonist jumping in anyway, is supposed to be hilarious because it highlights how unsolicited opinions are annoying. But it's presented in such a clunky way. Brian is trying to work, and Peter is just bombarding him with these hilarious memes. Brian's reaction, "Forwarding memes isn't work," is the audience's voice. He's the straight man to Peter's absurdity, and it's a role he plays to perfection. The show then tries to justify Peter's meme obsession by saying the internet begs to differ, and he's getting a lot of likes. This is the show's defense of itself, perhaps, that even low-effort content gets traction. Then Peter says the memes aren't his posts, they aren't original, and he throws a jab at Brian for writing a script called Barbie 3. It's a good dig, but it also highlights the cyclical nature of comedy and the reliance on existing properties. They acknowledge their own potential for being unoriginal while simultaneously criticizing others for it. The rock, paper, scissors meme example is another attempt to explain the simplicity of meme humor. Peter claims it's hilarious because it's based on a game. But then he asks, "Can you even?" which implies a level of disbelief that this is what passes for comedy.
The dialogue about who came up with the meme is classic Family Guy deflection. Peter claims he didn't find the pictures, didn't come up with the text, but he knew the perfect time to hit send. That's his contribution, timing. It's a perfect metaphor for the show itself, relying on timing and a collection of existing elements. He then uses the plane analogy. He's the pilot, the meme is the plane, and sometimes it goes on autopilot. He calls himself the autopilot of comedy. It's a self-deprecating joke that's also incredibly arrogant. He's admitting he's not doing the heavy lifting, but he's still in charge. The conversation then swings back to Lois's disapproval of looking for bin Laden's corpse. Peter dismisses her concerns, and suddenly they're talking about wanting a world of just guys. This is the pivot point for the main plot. The lightning strike is the deus ex machina that sends them to Fire Island. The dialogue during the lightning strike is panicked, and then the survival scene is pure absurdity. Clinging to balloons and a turtle is peak Family Guy logic. They find this house that looks like a RoboCop's beach house from the 80s future. It's a visual gag that's meant to be strange and out of place. The joke about primary bedrooms versus master bedrooms is a quick nod to modern terminology, immediately followed by Peter's crude joke about primary baiting. It's this constant oscillation between trying to be current and falling back on tired, offensive humor. Meanwhile, Tom Tucker is on the news, reporting on the sinkhole and the wreckage, confirming that Peter's boat was found near Fire Island, a famous gay party spot. This is the show explicitly telling us where the plot is going. Peter's voicemail message, "single and ready to mingle," is a classic Peter move, completely oblivious to the danger and focused on his own shallow desires. The dogs and holes meme comparison is another example of Peter trying to be profound about something utterly ridiculous.
Brian's frustration is palpable. He's the voice of reason, or at least the voice of sanity, trying to rein in Peter's meme-fueled ramblings. Peter's meme phase, where he talks like them even when he can't see them, is a genuinely funny observation about how people adopt online speech patterns. His meme voice is a highlight. Brian's retort, "cranky writer upset at friend's fun," is a jab at Brian himself, and the episode's meta-commentary continues. The bingo card joke, where Brian's supposed to have a bingo card but it's about what's not on it, is intentionally convoluted. The dialogue about bingo cards having numbers, not phrases, is a valid criticism of the joke's execution. Then there's the random toothbrushing tangent about Crest. It's another one of those jokes that comes out of nowhere and goes nowhere, designed to fill time and provide a brief distraction. The discovery that the house is stocked with the same things and the question of whether they look chic leads to the revelation of the island's inhabitants. The chic-ass boys line is Peter being Peter. The phone's still not working and the island natives reveal is the setup for the Fire Island fantasy. The description of the inhabitants, from the hefty bearded guys watching baseball to the shiny little jacked guys playing underwear volleyball, is a caricature of gay culture. The suggestion that it's Kokomo and the realization that Peter wished for a world of just guys is the payoff for the setup. He literally manifested his fantasy. The dialogue with Julian, welcoming them to the island, is where the show tries to create a sense of community, but it's built on Peter's selfish wish. The Molly joke, where she sits in your mouth, is a disturbing twist on the idea of a woman being present. The song is an absolute tour de force of offensive pop culture references, a rapid-fire assault of names and suggestive lyrics that's both hilarious and appalling. It's a perfect example of Family Guy pushing boundaries to their absolute limit.
And then Stewie's book deal for forwarding memes, it's the ultimate meta-commentary. He's not writing, he's curating, and the publisher thinks it's brilliant. It's the show saying, hey, even we can get a book deal for this stuff. The audiobook narrator, being Morgan Freeman, adds another layer of prestige to the lowest form of internet content. The description of the audiobook content, Will Ferrell shopping with his wife, is a perfect visual gag that captures a specific relatable moment. Peter's return to Lois, bragging about his magic island and the nice guys, is classic Peter. He's completely oblivious to the fact that he's essentially abandoned his family and is living a delusion. The introduction of Timothy, Michael, and Robert, and the insistence on using full names, is the show's way of highlighting the quirks of this specific community. The reveal that they're on Fire Island, a place for Wall Street guys and regional weathermen to be gay, is a clumsy attempt at social commentary. Lois's embarrassment is understandable. The dessert scene with the mention of Chef Mario and calling him a devil is a setup for the episode's climax. The warning not to tell our secrets is ominous, and Peter's insistence on Timothy is a classic Peter move, pushing boundaries until something snaps. The revelation that Chef Mario isn't the devil, but Timothy is, and that Peter is the one who's truly lost, is a dark turn. The final scene with Peter's "I'm driving" call to Lois and the subsequent realization that they haven't paid for anything is the true consequence of Peter's fantasy. The $5,000 per person bill is a slap in the face. The Uggos pay for hotties rule is a brutally honest take on social hierarchies, even within a seemingly utopian fantasy. Peter's excuse of having a wife for not having money is a pathetic attempt to justify his situation. The offer to pay half if they can escape is the final nail in the coffin for Peter's dream. The log flume ride reference is a callback to the show's own history of creating absurd attractions.
The episode ends with Peter still trapped in his delusion, promising an escape plan that likely involves more chaos. It's a fittingly messy conclusion to a messy episode. The entire episode felt like a series of disjointed observations about modern culture, stitched together by the thinnest of plots. It's not their best work, but it's definitely memorable for its sheer audacity. The show's constant need to be topical, to comment on everything from memes to celebrity deaths, often leads to these sprawling, unfocused narratives. And the ending, with Peter still oblivious and the others stuck with the bill, perfectly encapsulates the show's often cynical worldview. It's a world where Peter gets what he wants, but it always comes with unintended consequences for everyone else. And the fact that Joe could float in his chair felt like a throwaway gag amidst all the chaos, a reminder of the show's earlier, more character-driven humor before it got lost in topicality. You know, it's funny how this episode opens with that classic Family Guy intro, lamenting the loss of good old-fashioned values and the rise of violence and sex in media. It feels like it's been playing since the Mesozoic era, a constant reminder that the show itself hasn't exactly aged gracefully. Then they immediately jump into this car crash scenario, which Peter uses as a springboard for a pseudo-intellectual rant about restaurants versus home cooking. It's the typical Peter Griffin brand of nonsensical pontification, and it's supposed to be funny because, well, it's Peter. But then the episode decides to pivot hard into this whole meme culture critique. Quagmire, of all people, is presented as a meme virgin, and Peter tries to explain them as Mad Libs for personality. It's a surprisingly accurate, albeit condescending take. The writers then throw in a jab at Kevin Costner movies, implying they're as thoughtless as memes. It's a funny jab, but it also feels like the show is kicking a defenseless puppy, given how often Family Guy relies on similar joke formulas.
And then, in true Family Guy fashion, they veer wildly off course into the Little Mermaid debate. And then, the piece de resistance, Osama bin Laden. Yes, they bring up the Navy SEALs, the confirmation of his death, and then, somehow, inexplicably, spin it into a scheme to charge people $5 to kick his corpse. It's the kind of joke that makes you question humanity. And then they throw in a random Brazilian guy doing a samba dance as a palate cleanser. It's a chaotic soup of current events and internet trends, and the writing feels less like deliberate satire and more like a frantic attempt to stay relevant. The episode wants to critique memes, but Peter's entire approach is just forwarding them and waiting for the perfect time to hit send. He's literally embodying the critique while also being the subject of it.
Brian, as usual, is the voice of reason, the exasperated straight man trying to get some work done while Peter bombards him with his meme discoveries. Brian's comment about the memes not being his posts and not being original is a perfect meta-commentary on the show itself. How much of Family Guy is truly original and how much is just a clever rehash? The Barbie 3 jab is a nice self-aware dig, acknowledging the sequel fatigue that plagues entertainment, including, presumably, their own show. The rock, paper, scissors meme example is supposed to be the height of comedy for Peter, but his own bewildered reaction, "Can you even?" reveals his lack of true understanding. It's like he knows the joke is supposed to be funny, but he can't quite articulate why, other than it's based on a game. The whole explanation of who created the meme is a masterclass in deflection. Peter takes credit for nothing concrete, only for knowing the perfect time to hit send. It's the ultimate passive-aggressive contribution, and it perfectly mirrors the show's own creative process. He compares himself to autopilot on a plane, admitting he's not actively flying, but still in control, calling himself the autopilot of comedy. It's a bizarre boast that highlights his detachment.
Then, out of nowhere, they're struck by lightning, and suddenly they're on a boat heading towards Fire Island. Lois's concern about looking for bin Laden's corpse is dismissed by Peter, who then declares his desire for a world of just guys. This is where the episode really shifts gears, embracing pure fantasy. The scene where they're floating on balloons and a turtle is peak Family Guy absurdity. They stumble upon this RoboCop's beach house from the 80s future, a visual gag that's both specific and ridiculous. The dialogue about primary bedrooms versus master bedrooms is a fleeting nod to modern sensibilities, immediately undercut by Peter's juvenile primary baiting joke. It's a constant push and pull between trying to be relevant and just being gross. Tom Tucker's news report about the wreckage near Fire Island, a famous gay party spot, is the explicit roadmap for the rest of the episode. Peter's voicemail message, single and ready to mingle, solidifies his character's self-absorption. His comparison of dogs and holes to a mood is just baffling, and Brian's meme phase, where he talks like the memes, is a genuinely funny observation about online speech patterns. The bingo card gag is intentionally convoluted, a meta-joke about joke structure itself, and the toothbrushing tangent about Crest is just filler. When they discover the island's inhabitants, the descriptions are caricatures of gay culture, from hefty bearded guys to shiny little jacked guys. The realization that Peter has manifested his fantasy of a world of just guys on Fire Island is the payoff. The song that follows is an unhinged, offensive, yet undeniably catchy medley of pop culture references. It's Family Guy at its most boundary-pushing, mixing celebrity names with disturbingly suggestive lyrics. Stewie's book deal for forwarding memes is the ultimate meta-joke, acknowledging that the internet rewards curation over creation. The audiobook narrator being Morgan Freeman adds a layer of irony to the concept.
The description of the audiobook content, specifically Will Ferrell shopping with his wife, is a brilliant visual gag. Peter's return to Lois, bragging about his magic island, highlights his complete detachment from reality. The introduction of Timothy, Michael, and Robert, and the insistence on full names, emphasizes the quirks of this community. The claim that Fire Island is for Wall Street guys and regional weathermen is a clumsy attempt at social commentary. The dessert scene, with Chef Mario and the secrets, sets up the climax. The climax itself, with Peter tickling Timothy, is classic Family Guy chaos. The reveal that Timothy is the devil, not Chef Mario, and that Peter's fantasy has a dark underside is a surprisingly pointed critique. The $5,000 bill per person is the harsh reality check, and the Uggos pay for hotties rule exposes the superficiality of the island's community. Peter's pathetic excuse for not having money and the final agreement to pay half if they can escape underscores the folly of his wish. The log flume ride reference is a callback to the show's own history of absurd creations. The episode concludes with Peter still lost in his delusion and the others facing the consequences, a fittingly messy end. It's a testament to Family Guy's ability to take a simple premise and twist it into something completely unexpected, even if that something is often problematic. And honestly, Joe floating in his chair was a nice little callback to the show's earlier days. The episode opens with that familiar, slightly anachronistic Family Guy theme song, the one that's been warning us about the dangers of modern media for what feels like centuries. It sets a tone, a familiar comfort blanket of perceived cultural decline. Then, bam, we're immediately thrust into Peter Griffin's unique brand of logic. He witnesses a car crash, which he then uses as a bizarre justification for the superiority of eating at restaurants. It's classic Peter, taking a simple event and spinning it into an elaborate, nonsensical theory that only makes sense in his own head. It's supposed to be funny because it's so absurd, but it also feels like a warm-up for the episode's main event, the deep dive into meme culture. The show, in its infinite wisdom, decides that Quagmire, a man whose entire personality is based on gross-out humor and promiscuity, is the perfect character to introduce to the concept of memes. And Peter's explanation? Mad Libs for personality. It's actually a pretty decent analogy, highlighting the formulaic nature of many memes, but it also feels like Peter is critiquing something he probably engages with constantly. The writers then throw in a seemingly random jab at Kevin Costner, implying his movies are as low effort as memes. It's a quick, punchy joke, but it feels a little out of place, like they just wanted to get a dig in. But the episode doesn't stop there. Oh no. It then makes a swift detour into the Little Mermaid debate, a topic that's practically begging for easy jokes. And then, for good measure, they throw in Osama bin Laden. Yes, the man who was killed by Navy SEALs is suddenly a tourist attraction for a $5 kick in the balls. It's peak Family Guy shock value, designed to be offensive and memorable, and it's immediately followed by a random Brazilian guy doing a samba dance. It's a complete non sequitur, like the writers had a whiteboard full of trending topics and just started throwing them into the script. The episode's critique of memes feels particularly ironic because Peter's own contribution to meme culture is just forwarding them. He's not creating, he's curating. And his defense is that he knew the perfect time to hit send. It's a passive form of engagement that perfectly mirrors how many people interact with internet content, and it's also incredibly lazy. Brian, bless his perpetually exasperated heart, is the voice of reason, trying to get work done while Peter bombards him with his hilarious memes. Brian's comment about memes not being his posts and not being original is a sharp meta-commentary on the show itself. How much of Family Guy's humor is genuinely original versus cleverly repurposed? The Barbie 3 jab is a self-aware dig that acknowledges the reliance on sequels and established properties, a criticism that could easily be leveled at Family Guy itself. The rock-paper-scissors meme example is supposed to be peak comedy for Peter, but his own bewildered question, "Can you even?" betrays his lack of genuine understanding. He knows it's supposed to be funny because it's simple, but he can't articulate why. The whole discussion about the meme's creation is a masterclass in deflection. Peter claims he didn't find the pictures or write the text, only that he knew the perfect time to hit send. It's the ultimate passive contribution, and it's a perfect metaphor for the show's creative process, taking existing elements and delivering them with a certain flair. He then compares himself to the autopilot of comedy, admitting he's not actively flying, but still in control. It's a bizarre boast that highlights his detachment from the actual creative heavy lifting. Suddenly, a lightning strike throws them off course, and they find themselves on a boat heading towards Fire Island. Lois's earlier concern about the bin Laden search is completely forgotten as Peter declares his desire for a world exclusively populated by men. This is where the episode fully embraces fantasy, shedding any semblance of a grounded plot. The image of them clinging to balloons and a turtle is pure Family Guy absurdity. They then discover a house that's described as RoboCop's beach house from the 80s future, a visual gag that's both specific and delightfully weird. The brief mention of primary bedrooms before Peter reverts to his crude primary baiting joke shows the show's constant struggle between modern relevance and juvenile humor. Tom Tucker's news report mentioning wreckage near Fire Island, a famous gay party spot, is the explicit roadmap for the rest of the episode. Peter's voicemail message, single and ready to mingle, is a perfect encapsulation of his self-absorbed nature. His comparison of gogs and holes to a mood is another moment that defies logical interpretation. Brian's meme phase, where he talks like the memes he's seeing, is a genuinely funny observation about online vernacular. The bingo card joke is intentionally convoluted, a meta-commentary on joke structure, and the Crest toothbrushing tangent is a classic Family Guy filler gag. The description of the island's inhabitants as caricatures of gay culture, from hefty bearded guys to shiny little jacked guys, is broad and unapologetic. The realization that Peter has manifested his fantasy of a world of just guys on Fire Island is the episode's payoff. The song that follows is an unhinged, offensive, yet undeniably catchy medley of pop culture references, mixing celebrity names with disturbingly suggestive lyrics. It's Family Guy at its most boundary-pushing.
Stewie's book deal for forwarding memes is the ultimate meta-joke, a commentary on how the internet rewards curation over creation. The audiobook narrator being Morgan Freeman adds a layer of ironic prestige. The description of the audiobook content, specifically Will Ferrell shopping with his wife, is a brilliant visual gag. Peter's return to Lois, bragging about his magic island, highlights his complete detachment from reality. The introduction of Timothy, Michael, and Robert, and the insistence on full names, emphasizes the quirks of the community. The claim that Fire Island is for Wall Street guys and regional weathermen is a clumsy attempt at social commentary. The dessert scene with Chef Mario and the Secrets sets up the climax. The climax with Peter tickling Timothy is classic Family Guy chaos. The reveal that Timothy is the devil, not Chef Mario, and that Peter's fantasy has a dark underside is a surprisingly pointed critique. The $5,000 bill per person is the harsh reality check, and the Uggos pay for hotties rule exposes the superficiality of the island's community. Peter's pathetic excuse for not having money and the final agreement to pay half if they can escape underscores the folly of his wish.
The log flume reference is a callback to the show's own history of absurd creations. The episode concludes with Peter still lost in his delusion and the others facing the consequences, a fittingly messy end. It's a testament to Family Guy's ability to take a simple premise and twist it into something completely unexpected, even if that something is often problematic. And honestly, Joe floating in his chair was a nice little callback to the show's earlier days. Let's talk about this episode, shall we? It kicks off with that tried-and-true Family Guy theme song, the one that's been warning us about the moral decay of society since before most of you were born. It's like a musical comfort food, but maybe one that's been sitting out a little too long. Immediately, we're thrown into Peter's bizarre logic. He sees a car crash, and instead of concern, he launches into a full-blown philosophical debate about why restaurants are better than eating at home. It's the kind of convoluted reasoning that only makes sense in Peter's mind, and it's supposed to be funny because it's so ridiculously over the top. But the real meat of this episode, the thing they really want to sink their teeth into, is meme culture. And who better to introduce the concept of memes to than Quagmire, a man who, let's be honest, usually operates on a much lower intellectual plane. Peter's explanation of memes as mad libs for personality is actually pretty sharp, revealing the formulaic nature of internet humor. But it's also ironic, coming from a show that often relies on its own predictable joke structures. They then throw in a quick jab at Kevin Costner, suggesting his movies are as thoughtless as memes. It's a funny dig, but it feels a bit like low-hanging fruit. Then, because this is Family Guy, they can't just stick to one topic. Oh no, they pivot abruptly to the Little Mermaid controversy, which is basically a goldmine for cheap laughs. And then, hold on to your hats, they bring up Osama bin Laden.
Yes, the man who was reportedly killed by Navy SEALs is suddenly part of a scheme to charge people $5 to kick his corpse. It's the kind of joke that's meant to be shocking, and it's immediately followed by a random Brazilian guy doing a samba dance. It's a whiplash-inducing montage of trending topics and internet memes, and the writing feels less like satire and more like a frantic grab for relevance. The episode's critique of memes is hilariously ironic because Peter's own involvement is just forwarding them. He claims he knew the perfect time to hit send, which is the most passive form of content creation imaginable. It's a passive contribution that perfectly mirrors how many people interact with online content, and it's also incredibly lazy. Brian, our resident intellectual snob, is once again the exasperated straight man, trying to get some actual work done while Peter assaults him with his meme discoveries. Brian's comment about memes not being original is a meta-commentary on the show itself. How much of Family Guy's humor is truly groundbreaking versus just a clever rearrangement of old jokes? The Barbie 3 jab is a nice touch, a self-aware nod to sequel fatigue that the show itself probably suffers from. The rock, paper, scissors meme example is supposed to be peak comedy for Peter, but his own question, "Can you even?" reveals his lack of genuine understanding. He knows it's supposed to be funny, but he can't articulate why, other than it's based on a game. The entire discussion about who created the meme is a masterful display of deflection. Peter takes credit for nothing concrete, only for knowing the perfect time to hit send. It's the ultimate passive contribution, a perfect metaphor for the show's creative process. He then compares himself to the autopilot of comedy, admitting he's not actively flying, but still in control. It's a bizarre boast that highlights his detachment from the actual creative heavy lifting.
Suddenly, a lightning strike sends them adrift, and their destination is revealed, Fire Island.
Lois's concerns about the bin Laden search are completely forgotten as Peter declares his desire for a world.